Hello, I'm Joe Kopko from Hub International, and thank you for joining us today. Over the next hour, I'll be moderating a discussion with leading experts and advocates on the front line of a raging epidemic that is threatening the sustainability of the construction industry. Mental health disorders are common and affect all walks of life, regardless of socioeconomic status or occupation. However, the construction industry is experiencing a significantly higher number of suicides than any other sector, resulting in irreparable damage to families and robbing communities and organizations of their economic vitality. Before we meet our presenters, I have a few requests. We will be fielding some questions at the end of our presentation, so please enter them into the chat box, and we will follow up with any we may not have time to get to. I also ask for the duration of our time that you look at the immediate steps you can take to affect positive change, today, tomorrow, and beyond. And finally, I ask that you forgive any feelings of guilt for not doing more in the past, and channel that energy into starting more conversations and interacting with more employees within your company. For far too long, organizations have been unaware, misdirected, or conflicted on how they should proceed. Now, without wasting any more time, let's meet the presenters and get to work on stopping one of the largest threats facing the industry. Joining me today is Sarah Spohr, a risk consultant with Hub's Risk Services team. Also from Hub is Wendy King, our Director of Health and Performance. And also today is Greg Sizemore, Chairman of the Construction Industry Alliance for Suicide Prevention, as well as the Vice President of Health, Safety, Environmental, and Workforce Development with the Associated Builders and Contractors. Thank you for joining me today. For our agenda, we're going to be jumping into the construction suicide epidemic. We're going to take a look at the general state of mental health in the US and Canada and dig deep into why construction workers are not getting the help that they need, and give you a roadmap on how you can go back to your organization and begin to help your workers. Next. As a construction risk and safety professional myself, I too was unaware of the impact this was having on construction employers, and found myself focusing on the traditional areas of risk that many apply in construction. For years, I focused my time on educating employees on how not to fall when working at heights, how to shut down energized equipment to work safely, and ultimately wearing their proper PPE and high visibility workwear to prevent being struck by equipment on a job site. These factors constitute the majority of the fatal events we see in the construction industry. Yet suicide among our workers outpaces all of these risks, to the tune of 5 times as many workers dying by suicide than all other construction fatalities combined. To say I was spending my time in the wrong areas would be an understatement. I didn't become aware of this risk until late in 2008. I had been brought in to work with a construction organization that had just experienced their first fatality. And as you can imagine, it was a very grounding moment for them. My wife, being a mental health therapist, encouraged me to also focus on the workers who were close with the deceased, and as well as the ones who were on site that day and had witnessed the accident and the aftermath. Yet the investigations I was required to do, the pending legal concerns for the organization, as well as the other priorities that composed my day, seemed to leave me with little time to reach out. And then, on a random Sunday morning in November of 2008, I witnessed a young man take his own life. And to say it impacted me would be a gross understatement. I didn't know him. I didn't know why he took his own life, but it began to consume me. I was searching for answers, trying to find an answer to something that just simply didn't exist. I was trying to make sense of a situation that I knew none of the backstory, yet it still consumed me. It was explained to me that some people who want to commit suicide ultimately don't want to die. They simply want to end the pain and suffering that they were experiencing. With eyes wide open, I returned back to work and quickly realized that some of my employees were among those that were in pain. The supervisor of the deceased employee was silently suffering very, very badly. And by the time that I had reached to him, had another week gone by, maybe even another day, I may have been searching for reasons and answers again. The defining moment in that interaction with a man that I knew for less than 3 weeks came from the fact that I listened to him. I saw him. I recognized that he was suffering, and I simply offered to help. It required no money, no corporate resources, only awareness and a sense of purpose, something that I hope that we can inspire and replicate here today. Next. So for a moment, let's look at the broader landscape of mental health as it affects our society before we drill down further into the construction industry. Mental health, as it's defined, is the state of successful performance of mental function. resulting in productive activities, fulfilling relationships with other people, and the ability to adapt to change. These are common table stakes, things that we think and take for granted, that people come to work every day and are full, whole, ready to go. The harsh reality is approximately 6 to 7% of our workers are experiencing major depression. The economic impact that this takes on our economy is over $210 billion and growing. And sadly, over 10.3 million adults have serious thoughts of suicide in the US. And on average, there's 10 to 12 suicides that take place within the construction industry. We are not alone. We're experiencing similar statistics in Canada. Sarah, could you share some of the landscape of the mental health in Canada?
Thank you very much, Joe. Accounting for, of course, population change from the US to Canada, we are looking at quite similar numbers, where approximately 4% of full-time Canadian workers experienced major depression within the past year. This means that we have an economic burden of $50 billion and also growing here in Canada. And over 3.1 million adults have serious thoughts of suicide in Canada, similar to your 10.3. It's a sad state of affairs. Thank you, Joe.
Thanks, Sarah. And as I look at those numbers, I question, is Canada in a better position than we are? And I recognize that there's a government entity focused on providing resources to families and employees and really taking a hard charge towards solving this industry issue. Next. Mental health is taking a toll on every industry, every occupation, every family. Yet in the construction industry, it seems to have a bigger impact. And whether it's the seasonal work or just the dynamics of the workplace, we recognize that it's a significant impact on the availability of workers in this industry. So as we break it down further and look at the composition of the workforce, we see that a huge population of those in construction are white men in between ages 25 and 54. This is one of the leading causes of death for this demographic. We also have a high population of veterans that are participating in the construction industry, and the numbers are staggering. Where we experience 10 to 12 suicides daily, veterans are upwards of 22. When we look at the nature of work that our construction workers are tasked with daily, it's demanding, it's cyclical. We see it go up and down in the seasons, which means that it's fast-paced at times and inconsistent, leaving paychecks short, questioning when the next work will come. In addition, we see exposure to repetitive motion, chronic pain from the injuries that they've sustained, and some often self-medication. Further compounding that issue is we have a stigma within the construction industry. The culture itself hasn't always been supportive. In a situation where someone may need to ask for help, they could be met with resistance. It often becomes a competition around who has it worse. And in that case, no one seems to get help. We just compare who has it worse. And worsening the entire issue is a lack of developed leadership. We're facing a growing labor shortage in the construction industry. In some trades, we're seeing upwards of 10,000 employees short of what we need to be able to fulfill the anticipated work. Compounding that is that lack of developed leadership. We lose employees to other companies. We lose employees because we have supervisors that haven't been prepared to have basic conversations, let alone some of the challenging ones. The harsh reality is awareness and empathy in most workplaces is non-existent. And in the construction industry, it's sometimes very, very hard to find. There's an opportunity for us to do more. And as we get into the rest of the details of this presentation, I urge you to reflect upon your own organization and see where there's an opportunity for you to take one or two small steps to reach out and positively impact one of your own employees that may be suffering. With that, I'd like to turn it over to Greg Sizemore from the Construction Industry Alliance for Suicide Prevention.
Joe, thank you so much. It is my honor to be with you folks today. And the way you've teed this up is really critical for the audience to understand. And when you begin to unpackage all of the things that you mentioned, the real question is, why aren't the construction workers getting the help they need? But in order for us to really start to answer that question, we must challenge and change our own paradigm and build a bridge between the fact that over the decades, our industry has and continues to address many safety risks. Therefore, as a result, many of those safety risks are eliminated from the workplace. The industry has implemented preventative measures, developed processes, developed and improved PPE and safety equipment, as well as educated our employees on those safety risks. Having said all that, our view of safety now more than ever needs to expand to include employee mental health. To simply acknowledge does not address the real workplace challenge here. Next slide, please. Construction, as you said, Joe, is facing a very significant shortage. And I just want to reiterate what you said a moment ago. When you think about the workforce, typically our industry is viewed as less than desirable. There's a stigma about working in construction, just like there's a stigma about mental illness. That stigma alone creates a barrier to enter into the industry, just like it is a barrier seeking treatment for mental health. Now, the amazing thing about integrating mental health into an organization is that you can transform a company into being somewhere that people will want to work, where the employees we hire aren't expected to leave their cares and struggles at the front door or in the car or in the truck in the parking lot or outside of the office. We embrace mental health and wellness and offer robust employee assistance programs that meet the needs of real people, our employees with real issues and real challenges. Changing the culture of any industry by addressing these issues will be more attractive to the current and next generation of our workers. If we begin to think about the simplicity of what you mentioned earlier about aligning our approach towards mental health with our response to typical physical safety, think about it. If you are aligning mental health with safety, you can view it the same way we do safety as safety professionals. There's an upstream where we provide the training to prevent the issue from happening. There's a midstream where we reduce the risk by inserting personal protective equipment or instructing them on fall protection. And then there's that downstream. Heaven forbid something happen, but we have an emergency response plan or an evacuation procedure. So if we look at mental health in that same way, you consider that same approach, think about your upstream as those visible and vocal leaders in your organization supporting this as a corporate initiative, putting up the posters and the wall signs that illustrate that we're supporting this, discussing the topic at the beginning of every one of your company meetings, putting it in your newsletters, creating toolbox talks, and incorporating it into all safety education in your industry. Show support in work-life balance and build an encouraging peer support system. That's the upstream. Now, the midstream is not as complicated, but you look at deploying additional awareness in that training on the job sites, in the building, in the huddles, in the pre-task planning, putting a referral process in place when somebody feels safe to say someone is not acting on par today or behaving a bit different. Integrate wellness programs, have that EAP resource available so that any employee can offer it up to another employee they believe is facing a challenge. If we include these things in our performance reviews, our component of our incident and accident reviews, if we include this factor in with our workers' comp claims, and we plan and we look at pain prescription, which is another thing you talked about with substances, we contact, follow up, and return to work. It's no longer the thing that we can avoid by not talking about it. It is real, and it's something that we must do as leaders in our organization. Next slide, please. Back to you. Sorry, I forgot my downstream. My bad, guys. Having a plan in place. This is where it boils down to what Hub is all about and what you guys offer. And again, my apologies for the FUPA and the trip and slip here, but the reality is having the plans in place, the counselors, the people, the resources available for people. You cannot ignore it. You cannot think it's going to pass away. And you certainly need to consider including family into this discussion as well.
Thank you, Greg. Now that we've outlined what a best-in-class model looks like, we actually want to take a step back and look to address where we need to start. And that's with the situation most employers are in today, because the vast majority of employers do not have a best-in-class model. They may have pieces of the model, but even if they do, statistics still say that employers and employees aren't getting the help that they need. Let's dive into some of those reasons why. So no awareness. There's confusion on both the side of how we're feeling, what we need, as well as how to get the help that we're looking for. There's the stigma, which has already been mentioned. No access, returning to the EAP and the EFAP, making sure that we understand how to access those resources. Poor convenience, cost, and only reactive issues are required. Let's talk about the forgotten man, or of course woman, in a typical employer group. A 1,500 life group, for example, contains 285 employees who have some type of diagnosable mental illness. 84% of those employees are reportedly not getting the help they need. So the average employer has a sizable population who should absolutely be considered forgotten in their population because of all the reasons identified on the previous slide. Next slide. Now, if employees aren't seeking help, and we've established that mental health problems are embedded in your population, some of us may feel like we have a great corporate culture and employees would feel comfortable reaching out, but most employees aren't likely to discuss mental health with their managers, despite it being proven time and again to be vital to their workplace performance. Let's look at some statistics. 26% of adults who had taken a day off work because of a mental health problem reported lying about why they were out of the office. In Canada, that means about 500,000 employees per week. 58% aren't comfortable telling their boss if they were diagnosed with a mental health issue, and just 20% believe their manager would be supportive of workers battling mental disorders, as they feared their employers wouldn't take them seriously. Next slide. Because frontline managers are most closely in touch with employees and will know their typical behavior patterns, they are most likely to notice changes in their mood, attitude, or activities out of the norm. They might notice things like anger, not being cooperative, resistant to help, poor concentration, especially in the construction world. Poor concentration likely will result in an incident of other kinds. And talking about self-harm or suicide, which is going to be the most glaring issue of all. They might notice, the managers might notice or observe a change. The time to act is now. Having a direct conversation with an employee is the best place to start. You might approach with a simple question like, hey, I'm concerned about you. You don't seem quite yourself today. And is there anything I can help you with? Open and regular conversation with employees will build trust over time, and sincere dialogue will open lines of communication. Next slide. The good news is employees' readiness to seek help and interest in working for an employer who offers resources seems to be gaining steam. And we feel the COVID-19 pandemic will help surge this forward even faster. Taking a look at the statistics, 50% of US workers report that they are more likely to seek help now than they would have 5 years ago. And 91% of employees and job seekers expressed that employer-provided behavioral health was top of mind when evaluating current or future employers. Now I'm going to turn the presentation over to my colleague, Wendy King, who will outline some specific strategies you can tackle as an employer to help provide the right cultural foundations, as well as resource suite to assist your employees when they are ready to seek help.
Thanks, Sarah. We move to that next slide, please. Thanks. So I think the points that Joe and Greg and Sarah have made so far today were really laying the foundation for you guys. A lot of what we talked about so far during this presentation is about understanding the need, that the need is real. And we've touched on some ways that we think we can begin to understand the signals that employees may be showing us. And now it's really how do we use this opportunity to move forward. And I think it's fair to say that what we've been doing as an industry so far is not working. And you know the saying, you know, if you continue to do the same thing over and over and over again and you're not seeing a change, we've got to change the paradigm here. And that really starts with looking at what this traditional approach was which really has put the onus on the employee to go find help, figure it out, go ask the questions to the right person. Don't talk to my manager about it because I'm afraid of what the repercussions may be there. That approach is about low awareness of offering. It's about stigma. It's about a misunderstanding of what services might be available, and certainly a misunderstanding of what the reaction might be for that employee at the workplace if they do talk about it or ask for help. So this old siloed way of thinking where physical health and mental health and safety are all sitting in completely separate buckets, it's our role as leaders within the organization to blur the lines and begin to think of a worker and their health as a holistic approach to keeping your employees safe, happy, healthy, and whole. So that desired state where we're trying to move, and we're going to show you today some real strategies that you can implement, brings us to a much more integrated approach for how we can strategize within our organization to bring mental health front and center. So let's start with looking at things like well-being communications. Greg mentioned some things. He's got some phenomenal resources he's going to share with you. Hub has built some great resources as well. Well-being communications is the easiest, fastest place for you to start. Get it in front of employees, get it in your conversation, and make self-care awareness part of what you're talking about on a regular basis and what employees are reading about on a regular basis. Invest in what we call immediate support resources, meaning don't make them go and figure out where they need to go find an EAP phone number. They need to know what those resources are immediately, wallet cards, putting that phone number in their phone, covering those things in staff meetings, posting those things in places that are visible to them. Providing what we call a clear pathway to one-to-one support resources. So don't just say, here's our EAP number, go a step beyond and give them the steps it's going to take once they make that first phone call to get the help that they need. Certainly training your leaders. Since your line managers or your line supervisors, your foremen, they're going to be the ones who know the employees the best. Sarah went through a great list of sort of changes in mood, changes in activity, changes in behavior. Those are the kinds of things that we need to train our managers to pay attention to. So understanding what the signals are, giving them training on how you appropriately outreach to an employee. And then what do you do then? Now you've got the employee's attention. How do you provide the support and the resources that they need? So moving to the next slide. So we're all familiar with a physician's pain scale. Remember the little card that they'll show you if you go into the ER, you go into the doctor's office and you say, my knee is killing me. They're going to show you this little pain scale and it's got 10 smiley faces from pain level from 1 to 10. And this is kind of an easy way to train your managers with a simple skill that they can use for daily check-ins with their team. So if you begin a process like this with your team, with every day at the start of a shift, you get to say, within that team, how are you guys feeling? Or even pull your employees aside one by one. How are you feeling on a 1 to 10 basis? 10 being phenomenal. How are you doing today? And that employee says 10. And then you can say, really, tell me what 10 feels like. What's going on? Did you have a great weekend? Did you, do something fun with the family? And as you start to do this at the start of your shift, each shift, then you can go over the course of time and start to understand then a whole new barometer for where that employee is tuning in, right? So if he's been a 10, 10, 10, and it starts to show up as a 7, 6, 4, and then now it's a 2, now for the very first time, you have some tangible data that you can work with to be able to stop the conversation there and say, last week you were doing so great. What's changed? What's going on? Opening those lines of communications in an easy way that allows your worker to be able to just give it a number, which will then give it some priority for you to really be able to know which employees you need to address and at what level. And the next slide, I believe we're kicking back over to Greg.
Thank you, Wendy. That was incredible what you were saying about integrating it into just the simplest of procedures, the simplest of things on a job site. And I'm sure there's people out there right now that are listening to this thing that are saying, okay, at this point, you're asking yourself, where do I begin? This is all coming at me like water out of the end of a fire hose. And I'm going to tell you, it is as simple as the slide that you're looking at and as simple as what Wendy just described. Do not be overwhelmed by this. Look at it as a systematic approach to intervention. First, you should develop an understanding of where you are in the world of mental health. What do you offer your employees? And find out what you can do to complete a mental health and/or suicide prevention program inside your organization. You need to look at the construction workplace needs analysis, which I'll talk about a little bit later, because it really is a way for you to look at, this is where I am and this is what I need to do. Second, you need to develop a strategy with very specific goals and actions to be accomplished. Think about it, this objective, and this is what it looks like, and this is what success looks like. And then as a result of that, keep in mind your culture is critical, and you should always start there first. Simply put, and I love the quote by Peter Drucker, culture eats strategy for breakfast. If your culture doesn't buy into this and reflect the strategy, you have just purchased some very expensive wallpaper. Third, culture cultivates culture. Open, honest, transparent. These are not going to happen overnight, but they will happen to those that hold the course. This is who we are. This is the reality, and this is what we're going to do to provide or to make a difference for someone. Next slide, please. So now I get to talk about something that I am part of, which is called the Construction Industry Alliance for Suicide Prevention. And if you are asking yourself, where do I go, who do I call? One of the first stops that I would tell you to look at is, let me speak about the resources to jumpstart your strategy. Now, you can investigate Construction Industry Alliance for Suicide Prevention at preventconstructionsuicide.com. Again, that's preventconstructionsuicide.com. CISP has resources for contractors, large and small, self-performing contractors, subcontractors, as well as general contractors. And our desire is to equip and empower organizations and their leaders to integrate suicide prevention into the workplace. And we've developed tools that you can use to assess your readiness and begin to take the steps you need to take to address this. Next slide, please. Now, one example of a resource is the Needs Analysis and Integration Checklist. Now, this isn't about a particular provider of a service. This is an internal organizational document that you can complete to figure out what's your next step. This tool is to help you look at what you might already have in place, and it helps you determine what needs to be done. It is broken into 5 sections addressing everything. Remember what I said was first, your corporate culture, the resources that you need. Are you ready to assist employees in need? And what are the proactive factors, and how do you respond in a moment of crisis? See, when you look at that, the left-hand side of that, the left-hand column asks you very specific questions that you can rate your company in, and then you can go down the right-hand column, and that provides you the next step. Again, this is a downloadable PDF file on preventconstructionsuicide.com. This is labor neutral. This is everything that's bipartisan in America today. And if you'll take the time to fill it out, if you take that time, that's an investment in saving someone's life. Wendy, I'm going to throw it back to you for a second.
Yeah, thanks, Greg. That kind of tool and the ability to just go online and drag that down and start to work on it, what usually happens after a webinar like today is we get a lot of people nodding their heads and we agree and it all makes sense and we should do all of these things. And then typically it stops because you move on in your day and you go to the next thing, you put out the next fire. A tool like that is the difference between listening to this seminar and taking the information from the seminar and becoming proactive about creating strategy. And strategy means that this gets off the ground from being an idea and becoming a concept and then becoming a strategy. So you probably have some great things that are already in place at your workplace. And you know, mental health, suicide is a very focused area underneath the umbrella of mental health. So we always want to, of course, highlight not just the idea behind violence, suicide, self-harm, but think about mental health in general when you're looking through your strategy. So as you're going through Greg's checklist that he just talked about, think about all of your current programming that can come into play here, because physical health and mental health are joined at the hip. They should really be looked at as one and the same, and you should be giving them equal attention. So continue the course with your current programs and bundle in thoughts around how you promote mental health and suicide prevention in with your other programs. So continue things that are related to preventive care visits. During COVID, that might look like e-visits or telehealth options. If you have chronic condition management programs in place, like diabetes, obesity management, programs that promote physical fitness, great physical fitness and great physical health promote a healthy mind. The endorphins that are created during physical exercise help decrease stress levels. So look at these things and look at this list and make sure that you're not just addressing one segment of it, but that you're looking at how these things all thread together over time. Next slide. Now, when we talk about identifying the gaps in your program, so Greg's checklist is going to say, do you have this in place? Do you need to look at this? What are you doing about this? Do you need to look here for a solution here? I work in the space of health and performance, or also known as corporate wellness within Hub. And it's important that I am bringing to clients the idea of where can you look outside of your current company to get some help, because you can't do all of this yourself. So if you want to get some help and you want to look at some external resources, when I help and consult with you on that, I'm going to help you look at things from low intensity or low risk resources all the way through higher risk clinical intervention type therapies. And everything in sort of that first bucket is around prevention. It's around mindfulness. It's about getting people in tune with taking good care of their mental health. In the middle, we're getting more into coping and coaching strategies. Those are more around cognitive behavioral therapies that help an employee understand, I have a problem controlling this behavior. I have a problem harnessing my anger around my 14-year-old kid who just doesn't seem to listen to me anymore. Those types of things might need a modality like coaching, like behavior modification. And then in that higher bucket over on the right, those are clinical diagnoses. That's anxiety, depression, self-harm behavior. What tools and resources are we making available to our employees specific for each level of intensity? Next slide. EAP is always our go-to, right? Because EAP, or in Canada, we have a different name for it. Sarah, I know you mentioned it. I think it's Employee and Family Program. And so I love that the name in Canada actually includes the family, because this is where this all starts. So what I want to suggest to you guys is, if you have an EAP in place, kudos, because not all employers do. But it is a great foundational starting point if you have an effective EAP. How do you know if you have a good EAP? What's your utilization? Are they reporting to you on how many employees are utilizing it? Traditionally, utilization is low. What do we need to do as an employer to boost utilization through promotion of those tools and resources, making them more available and accessible to our employees? You can go through this entire gaps analysis here, take a look at your EAP with a critical eye, figure out whether there are things that you can be doing, or are there things that the EAP is not doing that you think you need in a provider. If you've ever picked up the phone and called your EAP and you're unable to get an appointment with a therapist for 3 weeks, do we really feel confident that that's the resource that's going to help that employee who's right on the edge, who needs help today? They're going to give a phone call and they're going to say, sorry, sir, we can't see you for 3 weeks. Well, what do we think is going to happen then? So think through the service providers you have in place and ensure that they're delivering a triage system. When they get that phone call in, what level of help do we need to get to that employee today? Do they need to speak with someone today? Or is it something that can wait? Next slide, please. So tons of resources in the mental health space. Some of them have been around for a very long time. Some of them are new to the marketplace. So when we talk about that intensity level, these are just some examples of solutions providers who are out in the space. Some of them do a much more comprehensive job than others. You'll see a couple there at the bottom of the screen, Modern Health and Ginger. They straddle all three of those buckets because they've got a pretty cool system in place that allows you to offer help to an employee no matter where they are on the spectrum. And what I love about these providers, if we go to the next screen, they're removing the barriers to immediate access. So instead of having to find the number, having to go find privacy somewhere to make a phone call, oh, I'll do it tomorrow because I'll have some privacy or that's my day off, they put all of this into mobile apps now, and they make it immediately accessible through a simple text. So instead of an employee having to figure out what they need to do to go find help, they just open the app and start typing, hey, I need to talk with somebody. And then there are these companies that are out here now that can provide online therapy. They can do all of the therapy sessions virtually, so you never have to walk into a therapist's office. And as we know, a lot of the men in construction are not going to want to go walk into a therapist's office to deal with the feelings that they're having. So having a virtual option and a chat option for them is a phenomenal opportunity to take down the barriers that allow people to get the help they need, do it in private, do it at a time that's comfortable for them, and get the immediate connection that they're going to need. And I'm using the word connection because today's seminar is really focused on suicide prevention, and we're talking about immediate harmful feelings. So we want immediate help for them, someone who can step that down and or get them to a suicide prevention hotline immediately for crisis support. So I think that wraps up my section. Let's see, Scott, the next slide. Oh, I have one more slide, and I can't wait to tell you about this one because this is a brand new resource that Hub has made available to employers at no cost. So in addition to the resources you're going to find on Greg's site, Hub has also made resources available to employers at no charge. This one is called Mental Health SOS, and it's a 12-month employee awareness campaign. This one is built to cover all aspects of mental health. So violence, suicide, depression, anxiety, parenting issues. The idea behind this is that every month we have a different theme that we're covering. You'll have an administrator's launch guide to show you how to utilize the materials, posters, emails, snippets that you can use on your intranet. And, you know, go back to the common thread you keep hearing throughout this presentation is communicate, 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 get it out in front. This type of campaign will help you get it out in front. And what I love about this is that we've built it to be custom to you. So there's no Hub logo on it. It's not about Hub getting any type of branding or exposure. It's called Mental Health SOS, and it's your program where you'll input your logo on the bottom of it and your specific resources that you've made available. So is it your EAP phone number? Is it a local provider that you want to have available to your employees? This is free of charge to Hub employees. Happy to explain to you how you get it. We keep this on our Hub client well-being portal. It's called choosewellonline.com. So you can go on there and register for access at choosewellonline.com. We'll follow up with that information after this webinar as well.
Excellent. So Wendy and Greg have pointed out some amazing resources that everybody can access. As we've already mentioned, this is an issue on both sides of the border. None of the documentation is going to be specific to one country or the other. However, Canada has gone the extra step, and they have built a national standard for psychological health and safety in the workplace. And this is a very robust document that is published by the Canadian Standards Association, so CSA. And although it was published in 2013, we're still having this conversation. So my opinion is that not enough companies are implementing this type of program within their business. So please do check that out. You will find it at the Mental Health Commission of Canada website. The Canadian Centre for Occupational Health and Safety also has some support training that goes along with it, all free of charge for both the employer side as well as the employee side. So do take the time to look at that. Again, this issue is affecting both sides of the border, so some of this documentation may help our counterparts to the south here, and it may be a document that's worth looking at for you as well. Additional resources, again, Center for Addiction and Mental Health, they do help you develop resources for the workplace. So just a few extra little tidbits and places to look for some resources to get that best-in-class program developed. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. Greg, Sarah, Wendy, all tremendous points, all great insight into some of the challenge that the industry itself is facing and the obstacles that continue to get in their way. So if we want to break this conversation down into 3 key takeaways, the first is we need to make it easy for workers to get the help that they need. Reform that company culture to normalize mental health discussions, help workers understand specifically how to utilize their company resources, and most importantly, we need to shift that paradigm. We don't need to wait until one of our own takes their own life in our organization to realize that this is a problem. If you were to poll all of your construction workers and ask them what numbers they had in their phone, I guarantee they know the number of their foreman so they can call off, and I guarantee they know the number of the payroll person to question why their paycheck wasn't what they thought it was or any other reason. But if they needed to get help, if someone came up and said, hey, what's the number for that employee assistance program we have? Would they actually know where to get it? Could they then reach out to a supervisor and be able to get that number from them? And it's highly unlikely. So there's a lot of work we need to do to be able to put resources in our workers' hands. The second is many tactics construction companies can take to promote employee mental health are completely free. The Industry Alliance for Suicide Prevention has done all of the heavy lifting. I can't stress enough what I would have been able to do in 2008 had I had that needs assessment and I've been able to go and look at the organization to see where do I start, what's available to me, and most importantly, where do I help my employees now, not tomorrow, not next week, but right now. And the last takeaway, there are people that can help. There's the Industry Alliance for Suicide Prevention, there's HUB, there's the employee assistance programs that you subscribe to and pay for. There's crisis text lines, there's suicide prevention lifelines. There's a number of resources that are available to people. But if they aren't aware of those resources, they can't take advantage of them to help themselves. Next slide. So we want to get into a little bit of Q&A. We want to ask some questions or answer some of the questions that came in from the audience. So I'm going to pull the first one, and it says, this is a great question. What if I notice an employee needs help, but I don't feel comfortable reaching out? Greg, would you mind answering that one?
Take a swing at it, Joe. I think that it's a great question, and it's all of what we were just saying, how uncomfortable we can be talking about this subject. But let me just put your mind at ease. You cannot do what you don't know how to do. And the reality is as we talked about, whether it's a hub resource or a Canadian website or CIASP or your EAP provider, and that's a whole bunch of acronyms for you and abbreviations, they've got education available for you. We at CIASP have partnered with an organization called Living Works that gives people the tools that they need so that they can gain the confidence to actually intervene and ask someone the questions that Wendy was talking about, a toolbox talk. How are you today? A 10 or a 2? Where are you at? So Living Works training is free to anyone that goes onto our website and simply takes the pledge that I am going to eliminate suicide in this industry. Free. I can't tell you, I'm going to say that one more time, free through the end of this year. I encourage you to get in there and take that. And it's not just for supervisors, it's for employees. So again, a long answer to a very short question. You can't do what you don't know. So either you learn or get the experts in there with you. That's what I would say to that, Joe.
You know, Greg, I think that makes a really good point. There's just this natural assumption that people would know what to do. And we've even seen in situations where medical professionals they've frozen in the moment where someone needed CPR or they had to respond to an injured employee. And the reality of it is our supervisors are just simply not going to know what to say or what to do unless they've been trained, they've been developed, and they've been prepared for those conversations. And one caveat I will add is if you are unprepared and there's no preparation that you've gone through to know what to say, the easiest thing that we can do in that moment is to listen to what that person has to say, hear what they're saying, and see them for that person, judgment-free. And if you think of a mental health condition and a person seeking treatment and ultimately, managing and handling that mental health condition, it's like a relay race. And the first person that starts that race with them is unlikely to be the one that they end that race with. And if we treat this like a baton, and I may not know what to do, but I heard what they had to say, and I certainly know that my human resources professional, my safety and risk professionals, or even the owner of the company would be more prepared and equipped to help that employee as well. So if we take anything away from this, is preparation is key, and at the same time, Don't allow this to sit with you. Pass it along if you don't feel comfortable reaching out and helping that employee. Go into the next question. That's very similar. I want to help my employees. Where do I start? So Greg, I know you jumped in on the needs assessment and the evaluation, and Wendy, I'm sure you have some thoughts too. So Wendy, do you want to start?
Sure, I'm happy to take that one. It's a good question because we covered a lot today. And as you start to dive into this and dig into this, there are going to be a lot of things to choose from. And I think to Greg's point earlier, don't allow this to overwhelm you. Any step that you can take toward additional tools, additional training, additional resources is a good first step. It's like eating an elephant when you start a new strategy, right? So one bite at a time. Where I would suggest that you start is with two things. I know you said, where would I start? I'm going to give you two suggestions. Heighten awareness across your entire company. Make sure that your employees know that you as an organization are paying attention to this. You want to help them with it, and you're going to give them the resources to get what they need. So you've got to start opening up the lines of communication and awareness. And secondly, I think you aren't going to get the impact you want from the awareness campaigns if you aren't training your managers. Because if your managers aren't supporting your overarching effort to try to improve access to mental health, and your managers aren't ready to know how to help, then you're going to have a disconnect between that awareness campaign and being able to kind of see the results that you need.
Great answer. Greg, do you have anything you want to add?
That was the mic drop moment, Wendy. Way to go. I just got to build on that. A good tradesman, a good craft professional has taken the time to master their trade. A good manager has taken the time to learn the skills. Let's not beat ourselves up because we don't know what we don't know. Let's use this as a learning opportunity. I'm going to share one quote with you, and I swear I'll shut up about this. John F. Kennedy made a statement before the country one time and said, I believe every American citizen should commit themselves to having a man on the moon by the end of this decade. If you take one thing away from this, let that be your battle cry when it comes to mental health. I believe that every construction owner in America today and in Canada, for Sarah and that group, both sides of the border, north and south, need to commit themselves to integrate mental health into their safety programs across America in the next decade. Period. That's what it's got to be. Don't let it scare you, which is exactly what Wendy said. Step into it. You're not going to make a mistake.
Absolute great insight. And I come across a lot of organizations that struggle with this idea of, is this really my problem? Is this something that I should be really even tackling? I mean, it's kind of been a taboo subject for so long. And, one of the skill sets I think that is important to develop in this is consequential forethought. What happens if I don't act, right? And the cost of not acting in this particular situation is great. And it's unquantifiable when we really think about what it would be like within an organization to lose someone close to us. So if you as an employer are questioning, should I do this? Position yourself someone close to you, son, daughter, wife, husband, aunt, uncle, friend. It doesn't matter who it is. Someone that you care enough about that if they were gone, that would carry a weight. And then imagine that all the signs and symptoms of them contemplating taking their own life were out on the table. Coworkers recognized it. Many people who are suicidal talk about it. Up to 70% of people talk about their suicidality, put it out there. And all of those things were on the table. The signs, the symptoms, and the employees in that organization did nothing. How would you feel? What would the impact of that be? Would you want to tear them limb from limb? Would you scream, why did you not do more? And that's exactly where we're at right now. We have far too many organizations that are simply not doing enough and not starting when we have the roadmap completely outlined. So I think we have time for one more question. This is a good one. How do I make the case within my organization to allocate more resources to help employees? The question of the hour. Is this money? Is this time? How do I make that business case? Wendy, you seem to have a really good handle on integrating this into an employer strategy.
Yeah, well, most strategies have to start with some financial statistics or some financial return here, right? So what's the cost of a life? What's the cost of allowing one of these things to go to where you have an employee who harms himself on the job or takes her own life. We have lots of data that we can share with you to build the case to the rest of your leadership. Obviously, not everyone on the call today is at the highest level of their organization, so we understand that you may have to take some of this information, synthesize it, and be able to present that up to the remaining leadership in your organization. We're prepared to help you do that. And I think the other thing to do is we spend so much money on our safety budgets. We have to, on our resources and on our training to keep people safe and keep our company whole and minimize our risk. This is another area of risk that we have to pay attention to. So are there dollars being utilized somewhere else in the company for something that is maybe antiquated or is not being utilized, or maybe you're paying for a service provider that your employees really don't care that much about? Take a look at where the dollars are today and see if there's a way that you can convert some of those dollars, redirect those into some more programming around taking good care of your employees' mental health.
I think that's a really good way to look at that. You know, there's a lot of efficiencies within organizations that can be tweaked. We're already out there as risk consultants doing job safety analyses and auditing, and we have eyes on our employees. You know, we're providing them with daily work instructions, toolbox talks. You know, there's an opportunity that we don't have to separate additional time, but to just utilize that same time to add in that scale and ask the employees how they're doing. Everyone's chasing employee engagement, and demonstrating concern and care for our people is a great way to move up the needle on engagement. Great. So, Greg, do you want to go ahead and tackle this one?
Sure. You know, and again, I'm not going to read the slide. I'll certainly just kind of speak to it. But the single biggest thing that, again, the takeaway is that ignoring this is not a strategy. Ignoring this is not addressing it. We've got to take and look at this holistically. I would submit to you, I bet you Hub has probably got data, but I've looked at some data resources out there that say a $1 investment in someone's mental health yields $4 of return on an investment. That's a significant thing that we need to do. And your employees want and need your help. I said at the beginning of this presentation, if you want to be a difference maker, if you want to be an employer of choice, then you put together those programs that address total human health. And that is from the hard hat and the PPE to what's underneath it. And just simply saying, well, I've got a stretch and flex program in place, and that's all the, you know, mental health and total health I need. Wrong answer. Wrong answer. You're going to have to dig into this. People just simply don't know how to have these conversations. Get them the education. I'm not promoting Living Works. There's thousands of providers out there. But the reality is, if you just want to stick your toe in the water, and I don't know whether it was Sarah or Wendy who said, step in, take a look at the resources that are available on CIASP's website, and recognize that it is time for us to do something in this country. It's time for us to do something in both of our bordering countries, and it's time, more importantly, to do something in our industry, to say no more. And if we approach it with the same tenacity that we do eliminating risk of physical safety, we'll be successful. We'll look back at this and we'll be very, very proud to say, look at where we've been and look at where we've come from. Think about it, 10 years ago, the total recordable incident rate in many organizations at that time was north of a 7.5 according to the BLS averages. This year, 3 is still not a good number. I won't be happy until 0, but you can see what happens when we focus on something. That's what this is all about, Joe.
That's incredible. Thank you, Greg. Next slide. So we come to that question, is this really our problem to solve, right? And when you really boil it down, our employees, they spend more time with us than any other activity outside of sleeping. And when we, integrate the mental health concerns that take place, sleep is often one of the first things that's impacted by failing mental health. So arguably, our employees are spending more time with us than any other location, activity, or anything else that they're doing. So it does become our problem to solve. And when we take into consideration the compounding effects of mental health, the sleeplessness, the fatigue, the staring off, the presenteeism, where they're in the workplace but they're not, and simply the fact that they're just not 100% in that moment. When we take into consideration the risky nature of construction, it opens us up to many other hazards and risks, and we would not ignore an open hole in the floor. So why would we ignore an employee who is on a ladder and we know that they're struggling? It simply doesn't make sense, and yet it happens time in and time out. So this does become a problem for us to solve. We also recognize that when an employer has the tools and the leadership to break down the stigma, and that stigma that's associated with mental health isn't just that I don't want people to think, poorly of me. It's also, I don't want to say the wrong thing. I don't want to reach out to someone because this is an off-limit subject and I don't want to get myself in trouble. By breaking down that stigma and generating that awareness, it becomes an easier problem for us to solve because it's a natural extension of how we're operating. Hey, how you doing today? Scale of 1 to 10. My goodness, a 2? Okay, talk to me about it. What's going on? And it just creates this easy path to the next question of how are you and what can I do to help you? What is it that you need? And identifying those things really helps put people on a path to treatment. And we know that despite rising cases of mental health, treatment works. Over 80% of the people who go ahead and receive treatment experience, life. They come back into the workplace. They're whole and they're contributing members of society and to their family. And I can speak firsthand with a wife that's a mental health therapist. I don't know the inner workings of her cases, but I do know there's been many cards that have showed up at her office. There's been many people that have come back to her, and there's been times when we've been in public where a hug or kind words have just said, thank you for listening, thank you for helping. And we can all do that. We all have ears. We all have the ability to listen and to help and to assist people onto that right track. And the reality of it is, if we don't act, we know it's costing us money. We know that already it's a $210 billion problem to our economy. And by the end of 2030, we may be looking at over 12 billion workdays lost just to the depression and anxiety alone. So we know there's so many commingling factors that make this a problem for us as employers to solve. So I task you, I urge you, I implore you that we need to do more as organizations. We need to do more as people and human beings to recognize these needs, to address them, and help people onto the path for treatment. Next.
This is really exciting for me because as if you haven't heard about the construction industry for suicide prevention, I want to thank the team at Hub International for giving us an opportunity to step out there at the platform. And I really want to leave you with a place that you can go to find out how to take the next steps necessary to address mental illness, mental health, and suicide in our industry, what to do in your organization. PreventConstructionSuicide.com has resources in both English and Spanish, from posters to needs assessments to cards to things that you can equip your employees with that does exactly what we've talked about today. There you're going to find the resource that'll help you make a difference in the company and on your projects, in your office. And even if the efforts affects one person, it's worth every moment of your time. I had the opportunity to have an intervention once on a project, and somebody who is sitting on the edge of taking their life because they believe they have no other way to cope with what's coming at them. And you're able to talk to that person and give them a sense of purpose and value. If you've ever experienced that, it'll change your life forever. And you will become a person that is seeking individuals that are needing help. And so Joe and Wendy and Sarah, the team at Hub, thank you so much for allowing me the opportunity just to spend some time with you today and say, visit the website, check out the stuff. It doesn't cost you a dime. We're giving you our branding construct. We're saying, download it, print it, use it, please. It's being out there. And it's something that is everybody's working on. So again, thank you so much.
Thank you, Greg. And I can't endorse those resources from the Construction Industry Alliance for Suicide Prevention enough. To say that they're turnkey is, again, an understatement. Regardless of plumbers, mechanical contractors, electrical contractors, steel erectors, GCs, it doesn't matter. The resources are universal. They can be immediately applied. And the first step in doing those resources already yields results. It gives you an action plan of what to do. As we close, many people look at the construction industry and say that the growing labor shortage is the largest challenge that they are facing. And I task us again to shift that thought of, we're focusing on how we bring more people into the organization, into the industry, yet we're doing very little to preserve the people that are already here. And we see that at a rate of 10 to 12 suicides a day, it's a problem. It's a growing problem. And these are just the numbers that we know. We're not taking into consideration the attempts or the other folks who are right at that edge. So I can't stress enough that don't wait another day. Don't wait a week. Don't make this a 21 initiative. This is a today focus, and simply acting is more than doing nothing. And we strongly encourage you to take those next steps. As Greg mentioned, on the Construction Industry Alliance for Suicide webpage, there's a Stand Up for Suicide Prevention pledge. We at Hub International, we took the pledge, and we strongly encourage you to as well. Thank you again for joining us today. Greg, Sarah, Wendy, thank you for taking the time and sharing your expertise. And as always, if there's ever any questions, we are all available to assist. Thank you again, and good luck.